Hello, everyone, and welcome back into the GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. And for our final segment of today's show, we go across the pond, talking all things January transfer window that just wrapped up a couple of weeks ago. And we have to talk about the big winners and losers of this window, because this was one of the best January transfer windows, in my opinion, in recent memory. A lot of movement, a lot of players finding themselves in new situations, a lot of positive to take away from it, but for some, a lot of negatives as well. Potentially not the worst negatives, say, for some of these teams that I'm going to mention, but ultimately, for where some of these teams are, they could have done a lot better or a lot worse, in the opinions of the winners. But also, several players in better situations now than in recent memory. Without further ado, let's talk about them all as well. Starting off with the first winner, a team that really did not necessarily need this guy, but because it's the price that we're able to get him at, that I'm really intrigued. Because now this team potentially has the best crop of wingers in the entire UEFA setup, in terms of domestically, obviously, not internationally. And that is PSG, Paris Saint-Germain. And with the signing of Kvaratskhelia, I do think that this PSG team not only was able to cement their status as one of the best teams in terms of the winger position, but also their status as a team that can poach a couple players as well. Because this, remember, was a team willing to splash the cash on a lot of players. They brought in Neymar for a then record transfer fee of 222 million euros and all of that stuff that went on back then. But now they made a shrewd addition with the signing of Kvaratskhelia that really was able to transform the tenor of this team, but also at a cheap price. Because I look at all the wingers they have, and yes, it's a deep roster of wingers. Bradley Barcola, Lee Kang-in, guys of that magnitude, I'm forgetting a big one. Ousmane Dembele is the big one I'm forgetting about. But by bringing in Kvaratskhelia and only about 40 million euros, that really is saying something about PSG. Because before, they would have probably met Napoli's valuation of Kvaratskhelia to buy him. And for the past couple of years, as Kvaratskhelia transfer rumors have been transpiring, the price was way higher, potentially as high as 120 million euros for several clubs. But I do feel like Kvaratskhelia is someone who, as a steal in this PSG team, really can add a lot of pace and creativity to an already crowded winger group. And then another big deal that went down for PSG is getting Xavi Simons to sign permanently on loan from... sending Xavi Simons away to RB Leipzig for a permanent fee of 40 million for that profit as well. And then as well as that, moving on Randall Kolo Muani. So this is a bit of shrewd business for a club known to spend big money. By signing Kvaratskhelia and then moving on, getting good profit out of Simons and Kolo Muani, I feel like this PSG team really won the window in a way a lot of people might not have expected from them. So kudos to them for making shrewd deals, both in terms of incoming players and outgoing players, to really bolster their squad. But then a loser, potentially, in all of this is a team that really is in the doldrums right now and should have done a lot more business and should have been a lot more proactive to really bolster their semi-new manager room in Abraham, and that is Manchester United. I know that because of PSR rules, they can't necessarily splash the cash, especially in the winter window, but I feel like United need to be more proactive. Yes, they got a guy in Patrick Dorgu who essentially fills a very important position in Ruben Amorim's system, but he's only 20 years old, and there were other areas that I feel like this United team could have addressed as well. For example, you're not getting many goals on the other end either. You may want to shore up that back line, but if you don't have a prolific goal scorer up top, you're not going to score any goals to compensate for your lack of depth in your back line either. Dorgu's nice for the system, but a goal scorer is what you need if you're United. And so I feel like that inability to diagnose a player who you can bring in that can help you up top was an ultimate failure for me. And I know that it's early on in the Ruben Amorim tenure at United. And I know that this board is trying to figure things out. And I know that because the Premier League profit and sustainability rules rule the roost, and you don't necessarily want to go over them or circumvent them. But if you're a team like Man United that wants to try to become again the cream of the crop in the Premier League and in Europe for that matter, you need to think like a big club. And sometimes you might need to spend like a big club. The fact that United were in on so many different guys, Gyökeres, Jimenez maybe, so many different strikers were rumored to want to go to Man United. Even a winger like Matthijs Tel, that whole deal falling through. You have to be disappointed if you're a United fan and how they handled the window. But ultimately, like I said, potentially the summer window will bear more fruit because you have more time. And, that's where a lot of these clubs do their biggest spending. So, if I'm Man United, I'm not necessarily completely panicked from this window because I did get a player in Dorgu who has a chance to truly improve because of his age. But not getting a goal scorer in a period where you're not scoring many goals or creating chances for that matter is really frustrating. So that's why they're a loser in my book for this January transfer window. Let's go to another winner. Speaking of Manchester United, speaking of a certain player from Manchester United, the first player to make my list here. How about Marcus Rashford? Because here's the thing. A lot of people in Man United will say Marcus Rashford didn't want to win. He didn't want to listen to all these managers tell him what to do. But I believe that Marcus Rashford wasn't invested in heavily by any of these managers. And yes, he had a couple of issues along the way, those parties that he went to allegedly. But ultimately, this is a player who, if you're Man United, you saw rise up through your ranks, have impressive seasons, have one of the most prolific goal-scoring seasons in a Man United shirt in the past couple of years, get cast to the wayside for guys in Højlund and Zirkzee who you splash the cash on, not necessarily investing wisely on, now struggling to even score any goals. And now Marcus Rashford, even though this is a loan move, and I believe it's not necessarily one that will see him move to Villa permanently, got out of there. And yes, Villa is definitely a place where wingers are going to have a lot of competition for the way they're playing right now. But I do like that Marcus Rashford was able to get out of that situation, go somewhere where his career might get revitalized, go somewhere that actually wants him, rather than stagnate on the bench for Man United for a team that obviously doesn't want to work him into their plans. And the funny thing is, he's better than a lot of the other options you have out there. I mean, yes, Garnacho and Ahmad are bright spots, but if you really want to create more chances, why not give Rashford a round at least in, say, cup competition? Because he can't just while away after, you've seen him come up through the ranks at Man United and you've invested time in him. And now both Ten Hag and Amorim don't want anything to do with him. So I feel that by moving on, whether or not it's permanent or not, was a good option for Marcus Rashford in the long term, because it gives him a chance to find his footing again. And, if this loan is terminated, he goes back to United, it gives him a chance to get reincorporated into this team. So that's why I feel like this is a win-win proposition for Marcus Rashford. He gets a chance to rejuvenate his career, and he gets a chance to prove the Man United haters wrong. The last team that's going to be a loser for me on this list is a team that, yes, is still in a title race, but still not necessarily address enough to convince me that they will stay in the title race for long. It's Arsenal. And Arsenal is always going to be a team that a lot of people try and criticize as much as possible because of the fact that they don't have too much attacking depth, and they failed to sign a high-profile forward in this window specifically. But I am liking what I see out of Arteta's plan for this Arsenal team. Because it's a plan that I feel like the Arsenal players are beginning to invest in. And it's a plan that I feel incorporates the best of what you want to see out of a team like Arsenal. They're bringing in young talent now. Wanri, Miles Lewis-Skelly is coming into this team, and they're delivering solid performances for you. But at the end of the day, when you're a high-profile team looking to finally get over the hump and win a title, you can't necessarily ignore the noise around you, whether this is more of a media situation than an in-house situation, and ignore the fact that you do potentially need a high-profile forward to alleviate some of the pressure on, say, a guy like Kai Havertz or Gabriel Jesus, because of the fact that this is the title race. This is the real thing. And yes, this might have shocked a lot of people in the Arsenal organization because of the fact that this came sooner rather than later in the Mikel Arteta era, but this is now real. This is now a period where if you fail to win a Premier League title, it's not going to be looking pretty for you. So that's why I say Arsenal is a loser, even though I like what Arteta's doing in-house. Because potentially you're going to need someone out of house to come in and get the job done and score the goals for you to lift you to a Premier League title. So that's why I think they're a loser. But let me know what you think in the comments about the January transfer window in general, because that will just about do it for today's show. This has been the GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. I've been your host, Christopher Shepard. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll be back here tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. As always, like, follow, subscribe. Make yourselves available to the Super Chat, Super Thanks, and Super Stickers features, as well as our website, gsmcpodcast.net, to contribute and interact with our show a little bit more directly. Other than that, out for today. See y'all tomorrow.